that I have finished reading in the past week. As I was saying in my last video, I had taken a week off, didn't really do a whole lot of stuff, but I did do some reading, which was really great, and I finished a book that I had almost finished, and then I had picked up a new book that it was like it's a really quick read, read through it, and it's amazing. And both of these books are books for those of you who are artists and creative people like me. So the first book, and I did talk about this a bit in my favorites video at the end of April, is How to Be an Artist by Joanne Nagler. There it is there. It is just a plain sort of green cover. It has 190 pages, so not a super long book, but I would highly, highly recommend this to anybody who is, you don't have to be a visual artist, you can be a musician, a writer, anyone who's creative at all. This is an amazing book with some excellent practical advice about things like organizing your money and your time and staying motivated. So I highly recommend this. It's divided into a few different chapters. The first is Answering the Call. And what that really talks about is if you're called to be a creative person, you have to answer that call. That not answering the call is being selfish because you're denying the world your creativity. And that if you're called to do something, you need to go do it. It also sort of talks about how as artists, we don't have the same amount of free time that other people have because we need to devote some of that free time towards our art in order to stay sane. And I can attest to this because when I'm not creating, I'm cranky and moody. And there was a while where I wasn't creating things and I just like nearly lost it because I just need to create things or I'm gonna go crazy. And that's something we need to do because that's part of who we are. And that other people you'll see other people spending their time doing other things, but just remember that that's not for you and that's okay, that your path is different and that can be a challenge, but you are called to answer it. The second part talks about getting a day job because a lot of us artists, unfortunately, especially in North America, in order to pay the bills, we need a day job. So day jobs, there's no shame in it. And actually, day jobs can really help us to develop different professional skills. But as artists, we need jobs where we don't take them home, where we're not on call 24/7. We need a job that doesn't drive us crazy, that gives us enough time to be artists but still pays the bills, that isn't like a lot of stress. And there's sort of this myth about the starving artist, but if you're stressed about trying to pay the bills or where your food's going to come from, you're not going to be able to create anyway. So you need to kind of find that happy medium for yourself where things are paid, but you know, you have money, but you still have time to be able to do your art, as well as to fulfill the other responsibilities that we all have in our lives. The third part is making peace with your money. So it talks about setting aside money for your art and not borrowing money and going into debt to make art. So don't, use the example if she made a CD and she borrowed money for it and it was a big mistake because then she spent all this time paying it off. So it's better to take more time and build up that money and then not have debt. And I can attest to, like, when you know, I don't have dad, and so it doesn't, you know, I don't worry about money. I don't worry about that. And by taking some of your money and putting it aside for our projects, then you have a reserve when you need to buy things like canvases or, you know, rent studio space or whatever it is that you need to do to make your project happen. So she gives you some really practical ways to organize your money, and that are simple and straightforward and don't involve a lot of time because we don't want to use up a bunch of our time tracking our money, right? We want to spend that time making art. And then the next part is about time and managing your time, how to master it, what you can do with that. And that's urgent and important are not the same. We can fill our life with all sorts of urgency. We can, you know, spend our time, you know, doing all these little errands and things for other people, but what's important is doing our art. And that doesn't mean that we neglect our responsibilities, but we need to make sure that we are spending time making our art. And then the next, it's actually the chapter 6, not chapter 5, but chapter 6 gets you to break down the time that you have, like actually organize your time and see how much time you have for art each week. even if you're only adding a few hours a week to your art, that's better than no time at all. She gets you to map out things like, you know, your work time and, you know, the time you've got to, you know, put the kids to bed and all that kind of stuff. And when can you actually block out time and to treat it like a job, like those hours you're putting into your art. And that's how you're going to make progress. And then chapter 5, which comes before 6, is about work ethics. And that talks about treating it like a job, showing up even when you don't feel like it, putting in your work because that's what you need to do. And then chapter 7 is about motivation and motivating yourself. So not thinking like a hobbyist, thinking like a professional. And how to work on, like, especially if you have multiple projects going on, how to divide your time, things like that. So I would highly recommend this if you're a creative person, just because it is super practical and down to earth, and she's somebody who actually creates things. So, you know, it's not somebody that doesn't have any experience talking about it. And the second one, which is closely related to that, is a book that was recommended to me. It was so funny because I was talking to another artist about this book, and they said, oh, you should get this other book. And then I heard about the same book on a podcast. And then I was reading this book, and it also talked about the next book that I bought, which is this, The War of Art. I also highly recommend this book. This book came out 2013, I think. Oh, 2002, so it's an old book. It's been around for a while. I thought it was sooner, but not. I had actually never heard of it before, and then I hear about it everywhere in like the last 2 weeks, which told me I need to get this book. And it's not a huge read. It's got all these nice little kind of bite-sized pages, little essays and things. So, you know, you can read a little chunk or two if you want, or you can sit down like I did and just read it over a couple days. And it is, this guy wrote Bagger Vance. He wrote a bunch of other novels and screenplays, so he's an active working artist as well. And it's Breakthrough Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles. So it has 3 main parts. Resistance, defining the enemy, is the first part. So it says that the major enemy to making art is resistance. And so a lot of us would think about our art, but then we don't actually go and do it. And we find all sorts of reasons why not to do it. The laundry needs getting done. We create drama in our life to sidetrack us from making our art. We invent all sorts of excuses, or some people get addictions or whatever it is to avoid doing the thing that we are supposed to be doing. Sorry, one second, I have a cough. Pardon me. Should edit that out. Anyway, so many of us spend time creating all these things to avoid doing the thing we know in our heart we should be doing. And whether that's, you know, we have a dream for a business, or we want to make paintings or write that novel or whatever, we will find all the reasons in the world not to do it. And that is, he treats resistance like the enemy. It's like the devil trying to tempt us away from what it is we're supposed to be doing. And he talks a lot about how it's insidious, it's impersonal, and he is very funny and humorous. These little stories he has, like, he talks about how some families will create all this drama, like some whole families or groups of people are invested in creating drama in our lives, and resistance comes along and laughs because it's like, well, these people ain't going to be getting any work done. So, you know, we can sometimes create drama around us just to not get work done, and it says to ignore that shit. Ignore it. Because that is just gonna sidetrack you from your stuff. Some of us will create trouble or attract attention to ourselves because it's easier to get a fancy car to attract attention than it is to do the stuff in our heart that we know we should be doing. So it's very funny and interesting, and it really gets to think about your resistance differently. And why you're not doing it, and you know, how we rationalize ourselves and all those sorts of stuff. Part 2 is about turning pro, and it's about thinking of yourself as a pro and not an amateur. An amateur does something when they feel like it, and when inspiration strikes, they don't sit down every day and do what they need to do or take steps towards what they actually need to do. And they talk about this in the other book as well, like treating it like a job, like saying, these hours I'm doing my art. That's what a professional does. Whether they feel like it or not, whether they feel the resistance or not, they get up and they do it. And that's how you be an artist. So it talks about thinking like a professional, about being patient, about having order. Even if you're afraid, even if you think it sucks, you still do it anyway. So it talks about that, and then book 3 is Beyond Resistance, and it talks about how there's unseen help on the other side, and whether you want to think of that as God or the universe or the muse or whatever, that there is something prodding us on to make our art, to make the creative thing we need to make, that gives us ideas, and that if we continue to show up every day and do what we need to do, then the muse of the universe will show up for us as well. So very inspiring, very, very funny. It's just basically kind of is a kick in the bum for anyone that's an artist. So I highly recommend both these books if you're creative and you want a little kick in the bum and some advice about how to go about it. So these 2 books, love them. If you have them, if you've read them, let me know what you think. If you're working on an art project, let me know what you're working on. I would love to hear all about it. Like and subscribe. I'll see you all next time.